Today is June 14th. I'd like to call the order at 9:30, the curriculum committee meeting. I'm the chair. My name is Tony Schmidt. I'm a school board member. I am on here and then also superintendent.
Laura Jackson, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
Jill Reese, Director of K-8 Education.
And Heidi Spingola, District Literacy Coordinator.
First item of discussion is the selection of the curriculum committee chair.
Yes, so today is the day that we need to decide who's going to be the chairperson of the curriculum committee. The chairperson of the curriculum committee really connects with me in between, I connect with Jill in between. We really work on scheduling the meetings, and if you recall at our last meeting, we kind of laid out a calendar for the year of when the committee would be expected to meet. Sometimes we have additional meetings. The chair would connect with me on scheduling that, or Jill on scheduling that if we needed to add additional meetings. We also tend to review the agenda in advance. Sometimes we discuss it here and then we don't necessarily talk about it in between, but we discuss the agenda in advance otherwise in order to make sure we have that. The chair may be funneling additional questions, comments from board members, community members, whomever, to the appropriate administrator. And then at these meetings, the chair calls the meeting to order and calls the meeting to close. Also, the chair will facilitate the transition between agenda items. Anything I'm forgetting about what the chair of the committee does, the chair's responsibilities? Oh, yes. That would be a big one. At the board meetings, the chair will give a summary of what happened at the curriculum committee meeting and the discussion that occurred. And so you do that after each meeting. If for some reason the chair was not there, another committee member will substitute and provide that summary. All right. So let's talk about interest in being the chair. And I'll turn that over to you two.
Yeah, you're good. Sure. Okay. I emailed Tanya and I just said that I would be willing to be the chair. I know you're doing some other things too and busier, so.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, if you're interested in being the chair, I'm happy to, go. Great.
Okay.
I nominate Melanie Ergot, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
As chair of the curriculum committee.
Did you accept, Melanie? All right. So that's really all there is to determining the chair of the committee. And I think that it's also appropriate just to kind of remind you that we do have a board policy on committees. That policy is currently suspended. And so we suspended that because we weren't operating all of the committees. And at the last review of policies, it went through. When I did check the website for the committee policy, it says that it's still suspended. So the reason for that originally was we originally suspended it during COVID because we weren't operating during the shutdown period, all of our committees. And then coming back, the committees gradually started meeting again. Curriculum started meeting first, then policy committee got going again. But all of the other committees that had originally been part, well, not originally, that had been part of a previous revision of the policy were not operating. And the board really wanted to hear those things as a whole rather than in committee. One example is the finance committee. Instead of that committee meeting every month, Andy is doing reports, Andy Sarnow, is doing reports at every board meeting for the full board. Or not every board meeting, but the reports of the expenditures and things like that. He does with the full board and the subgroup. But what remains is that the committee is an advisory committee. So We make decisions here about our scheduling and whether we're moving things onto the board, but in committee, we don't take actions that the full board would need. So really, the actions we take have to do with our schedule and have to do with, yeah, we think that's ready to go to the full board, or go to the full board, but when you present it there, share this additional information. And that's, am I forgetting anything with that? I think we're pretty, it's a very much a short summary, but just a reminder, and we usually do that at this first meeting. Committee, well, it's not the first meeting of the committee, but it'll be my last one, or last one. All right, then the, not listed on the, as an agenda item, so, but I just want to point out, one of the responsibilities of the chair is to help schedule the meetings, and we listed out the meetings as discussed at our last curriculum committee meeting. So after today, our next curriculum committee would be July 19th. And we talked about a few times, but I just would like to confirm, I think we settled on 8:30 as being our regular standing time. Is that accurate? Okay. So I would like to post this on the website so that people know when the curriculum committee meetings are there, and I'll identify 8:30 as the time. If we need to change that, we'll just communicate prior to the meeting being posted, and in case there's a change of time. Events at times have led us to need to cancel a meeting after it's been posted, and that's okay, because sometimes things happen. Yes. All right. So Melanie, do you feel we're ready to go on to the next agenda item?
Sure. You're
Yeah,
obviously.
your tenure starts now.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I don't really know. I'm gonna figure this out as we go here.
You have the agenda, right?
Yeah, I do. So then we would just say, we're gonna move on to the annual parental notice of academic standards.
So every year, at the first board meeting of the school year, which is the first meeting in July, the school year technically starts July 1 for the new school year. So at the first school board meeting in July, the board is asked to approve the annual notice to parents. And what the board is approving is the information that these are the standards that the district is utilizing during the course of the school year. And so we have used the same kind of format, which I think provides our families consistency for a number of years. And we update it when there are new standards in place, and it simply lists the grade level and then has a link to the standards. The standards that are on here have been approved by the school board at previous meetings. And it's really this notice to parents that gets approved, and then we post it on our website so that parents can access that information. On the on the agenda item, you will note down below that these standards will be reviewed during the year. Previously, our district had adopted the ACTFL standards, which are the world language standards. And we have stayed with those. The state has revised the standards for world language. They paired well with the ACTFL, but we'll do a formal review of those. And then at some point during the year, I would predict around December or January, we'll talk about the world language standards, and if we feel there's a need to transition to the new state ones. And so those will be under review by teachers first. And then as we're considering them, they'll be brought to the public for comment. Same thing with the mathematics standards. The Department of Public Instruction previously updated the math standards. And we have not brought those forward to the board for approval yet. So we have the last version of the standards are what's linked on the parental permission document. Teachers have been reviewing these and will continue to review them. We're looking at alignment with our coursework and our results and where we're headed. So those will again be brought forward to the board for approval at another point during the school year, if that is in fact where we would go, where we would recommend, and we'll discuss that at the curriculum committee. I have them on here so that at any point, if you were to start jumping in and taking a look at those, you have both sets of standards right on the same section 4 docs. The annual notice has the current ones in place, and then these are continue to be up for review.
Okay, so are some of them, are they all going to be coming up for you, or just certain ones that have changed?
Particularly the two, the world language and the mathematics. So the revised versions are linked in the executive summary, but not linked on the annual parental notice.
Okay.
Health, I expect to hear from the state in July. They expect to go to public input. So not finalized, but they're expecting in July to open a period of public feedback on the health standards for the state. When the state identified that this was going to be happening, we paused some of our K-12 health work because we would like to be aligned with new standards too. But there's things we can address in K-12 health work that will continue forward. But we'll look at the new standards when they come out. Any questions about this?
Is there a list for future years? Like, is there any way we can
On the
know?
state,
Yeah.
like what's coming up?
Yeah, what's the
You know,
forecast?
Yeah, they typically do it by content area, identify it. So, they've recently done the 4 core areas. Health is in process, where language was recently done. Tech and engineering, we have, if you look, our standards for tech and engineering that we use are the ISTE standards. And so those are, these are the Wisconsin technology standards. We also have, when you look here, we have the ISTE standards listed. And so there are different standards in place that cover different parts of that. I believe that their next areas, they've done music recently, so they'll be circling back around. I think they'll give it they'll probably give it, I don't expect to see math or literacy for another 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, everything cycles.
Correct. But
You're saying that every subject is on a different cycle.
they are.
Okay.
And the state does respond to national changes, so after that.
So they might change their cycle as
Correct.
in reaction to, okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, that makes things less predictable. Yeah, I guess. I think it's important that we do respond to, every time the state makes a change. But I'd also like to be not only responsive, but kind of being in charge of our own destiny.
And that's, I was kind of thinking too, like, who develops all of these standards that, are we required to go along with all the standards that whoever makes these up,
Yeah, so the state uses a process where they'll put out a call for people to indicate an interest. So for example, Curtis Marquardt, who is one of our instructional coaches at the high school, he participated in the state team that worked on the math standards. So there are educators, administrators from around the state, as well as college professors, people from the Department of Public Instruction. And depending on the industry, they also have industry experts that may participate in it. So they review what's, now that we have a start for the standards, they review what's there and then go through a facilitated process facilitated by the state and reviewing, rewriting where necessary, identifying strengths and opportunities within the standards. So they'll seek public input for, to guide that work. And then once they have a written version, they put it out there for public comment. After that period of public comment, they may go back and do some significant revisions, they may go back and do some smaller revisions. Heidi, do you want to comment at all about the literacy standards when they first were shared for public comment? And then DPI kind of took a little bit longer, I don't know if you recall this, but it was like June. And they had said they'd be out in early spring. And they took a little longer in that revision after public comment. So do you want to?
They actually, for the last round of literacy standards, they actually held 2 rounds of public comment, or like open feedback, and then they took many of the suggestions and made modifications after the first round, then put out a second and made minor tweaks after that, and then put things out. So I will say, in my opinion, at least from the literacy experience, DPI was very good about considering all perspectives from across the state before they kind of put their stamp of approval on them and said, here are our new standards, and put them forward.
So then our people looked at them, examined them, and then gave recommendations to the school board to adopt. And do we have to adopt the standards by the state? We don't. It is intensive work to write them and look at that developmental, how it develops across the levels of understanding. And we, when we look at the standards for a level of rigor, we need to, if you're adopting and developing your own, you have to really make sure they are at the same or a higher level of rigor. When you approach that higher level of rigor, also have to be looking at the development of the child.
Sure.
And so that it's not just about doing a higher level, but is that
Is
development?
the child actually ready to?
Correct. So it's intensive work and very time consuming, but districts can choose to do that.
The resources.
You can always like
that they
tweak
do.
stuff too, like if there's something you think like maybe doesn't fit
Correct.
your district particularly, maybe you tweak it, like instead of writing all of your own, because I can see that like who was going to do all that when it's already
Right,
done,
yeah,
right?
the resources that we would require to do our own independently would be beyond what I think our district would be willing to invest.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, could we insert, we could insert, and so what that would, typically what that would entail is, someone proposing an alternative standard or an additional standard or something like that. And, the committee, the, K-12 educators or pre-K-12 educators who are, really know this content well, would be in discussion with the administrator who's leading that forward to see if that is one that they would recommend adding or not. And then if they would recommend adding it, it would be included and then there for school board approval. If, with the recommended standards. But this part is literally just a letter that notifies parents of the standards in place. And, but the board has to approve the letter.
Okay.
So we'll take that, not to the next board meeting, but the first one in July, because the next one would be too soon.
Thanks, and then we'll move on to the literacy implementation update.
Alright,
Do you
so,
want those?
alright, so over the past couple of years, the district has been working to implement a comprehensive literacy framework. The goal or implementing this framework was established back in kind of the 18-19 school year. It was brought to the board, and then we started implementing during the 19-20 school year pre-COVID shutdown, and then we've kind of continued along our way since there. So just regrounding us, our goal for this is to kind of make sure that our literacy instruction is really grounded in the theory of learning and making sure that we are making those intentional connections across content areas so that our students have opportunities to apply the skills of reading and writing to science and to social studies and to reading and writing disciplines themselves. In order to do this, we really worked hard to have a common language and a common expectations for all of our students as well as our teachers to help us with that implementation. So looking at 2021, 2022, kind of where did we go this last school year? There were a few big goals that we worked towards. One of them that was previously discussed was building the capacity and the knowledge of our district coaching team. And we did bring in a consultant to work with our district coaching team to train them throughout the school year. It was a very intensive process that they participated in, a lot of professional reading, a lot of specific coaching, even taping their coaching sessions and analyzing their behavior as coaches to help them be better coaches in the future and better support our teachers. So that was a goal that we accomplished this school year with our training. We also then worked on developing curriculum units. This year, we really worked to align the ELA standards to the board-approved resources. The board-approved resources, again, are some of the Fountas Campanella resources, as well as some of those Lucy Calkins resources. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we were bringing those, integrating them into our comprehensive literacy model, aligning them to our standards so that we have a very aligned and developmentally appropriate scope for all of our students at the K-8 level. And then another component we began working on was making sure that our instruction is truly what students need. So making sure that we're looking at what does this student need that might be different from what this student's needs are, being authentic and responsive to what those needs are, and making sure that we know how to do that flexibly in a way that's still aligned to our standards to scaffold all of our students to reaching those high levels of success. So those were three big goal areas there to review. Another component then, we had hoped that we were going to have 45% of our students reach the proficiency benchmark on our STAR assessment for the end of the school year. We did increase, but we didn't quite get there. So we got to 43.7% of our students met the proficiency benchmark for STAR this spring. So again, it was kind of a goal of where we wanted to get to, not totally reached it, but definitely still saw improvements, which was a very positive thing. We also then have begun looking more closely at our data in regards to comprehension, which is really that big act of reading, is making sure that our students are able to make meaning out of what they read and can understand it, apply it, and use that knowledge. So we have an assessment that we're using specifically at the K4 level for all students, but this goal was really a K8 goal. But to highlight some specific data, the assessment is actually called, it's a running record assessment within our benchmark assessment kit. And the way it works is our students read a passage aloud to our teachers. They are checking on the students' oral reading fluency, are they making errors when they read? Are they accurate when they read those pieces? And then they also follow up that reading excuse me, with a round of comprehension questions to kind of see where are our students falling. And those comprehension questions go from within the text, which is a very literal question, kind of that right there question, the beyond the text, which is kind of an inferred thing, like I had to read between the lines a little bit, and then the about the text, which is really, this is the author's deeper meaning. This was like the message the author wanted us to get out of the book. And we kind of tracked where our students falling within there. The scores for each of those sections are a 0 to 3 score. And you'll notice not a huge variation right now across those scores when you look at the average score columns. But I'm going to highlight kindergarten as an example. Are within the text, so our literal pieces, 2.28 was the average score that students were getting out of 3. Whereas our about the text, what does the author want me to know, was just a 0.76. So a very different level of student understanding there with those types of questioning. So this is an area that we intend to bring forward in more of our PLCs next year, as well as continue to grow through our questioning techniques in the future to continue to support students in their growth of comprehension. Yeah, Tanya.
I would think that especially in kindergarten and first grade, that the beyond the text and the about the text would be low. Like, I don't know that that's an unexpected or, again, I don't wanna look down on our students for not having the 3.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So definitely, we typically would expect developmentally for that to be low, I think, or lower than our within the text. I think our goal, though, is to make sure that we're still exposing our students to the idea that the whole text contains a message instead of just individual parts, and helping our students start to grasp that idea at an earlier age so that they are able to understand those things. Even like, identifying some of the themes, like this book was about friendship, or this book was about places in our community, and helping them kind of identify and understand those bigger picture pieces would be kind of our goals in those areas.
Okay.
So kind of helping them to categorize information at that level versus just individual pieces, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, and having them just hear it just talked about is part of the process.
Right.
Of getting there. I just would hate for any kiddos to feel like they fall short when it's really not.
Yeah.
Reasonable to expect that of them
Yeah,
anyway.
developmentally, that would be where they.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think our goal is really it's really to just help us as teachers be better at making sure we're pulling all the pieces together and helping them see how the puzzle pieces fit instead of focusing on the smaller pieces. So I think that's where our goal is with a lot of this data, is to say, all right, now let's kind of pull things together for kids so they can see these larger connections, so we can start to expose them to those things. That will help them then with transferring things between different grade levels. Like a maybe simpler example, like in first grade, plants have a life cycle, insects have a life cycle. So helping them expose and connect those two bigger pieces, that would kind of fall within that about the text kind of category, and helping them link those things together and see those connections.
Well, and I think, I guess the reason why I even bring it up is because, some people that aren't part of this discussion,
Yeah.
they might look at this and like, oh, you're falling short as a district.
Right.
And that's not how I view these scores, as that's not how they're intended to be used.
Right.
And it can be easy for that to be misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's important, all this data is developmental, so it gives the classroom teacher, the principal, the district office data to understand what kids need, and then to adjust or bring those tools and build that background knowledge for them. So it's really meant to inform and help students grow.
Another piece then that we focused on this school year, we've actually tried to focus on it for the last 2 years. Granted, some things with COVID have made this school a little bit of a challenge, but that idea of providing students with one-to-one conferences in reading and writing, basically meaning the teacher would individually meet with a student or maybe a pair of students, set a goal with them, go back and meet with that student again a few days later, check in on that goal, and kind of keep some data around how that's going. We realized last year we were at about a 70% implementation rate of conferring happening on a regular basis, and having it be differentiated. Not that the entire class has the same goal, but different students within the class might have different goals based upon what they need. This year, we are still at about the same with that 68%, so dropped a little bit, but still kind of statistically the same. Some things that teachers have reported out that were difficult were some of those pieces with COVID with social distancing. You couldn't sit right next to a student to confer with them, and, you know, having those
Partition?
yes, the partitions, thank you, I can't think of what they're made of right now. But having those made things a little difficult, so it was a piece that we continued to work on. So some of the things we talked about, at the end of this school year was, with our new curricular resources, what opportunities for conferring already exist and how can we embed those things? So this is something I would anticipate us to continue working on, to really see more of our kids have more access to that on a regular basis throughout the entire school year. And that will really help us target what does this student need versus what this student needs to all reach a common goal. At the high school level, we also talked about applying district tools to curriculum practices. I'm going to back up and say we talked about it, I already mentioned it at the K-8 level. So at the high school level, we've been doing some work looking at their courses and the courses that students have opportunities to take, making sure that we are double checking our standards alignment and that our outcomes from those courses are aligned to those pieces as well. We're working to gather some feedback from the students to kind of determine what are any course shifts we want to make in the future. Do we need to do a better job of supporting students in a certain area? So we're using that feedback to help us, and that 9-12 work will continue into next school year. The K-8 work that I referenced earlier with the Fountas and Pinnell and the Lucy Calkins resources will have a very, very heavy emphasis on the reading resources for next year. And we've really worked hard with that initial implementation and the training of those new resources with reading. And then starting in fall, we'll be bringing in more of the writing components as well. We've kind of staggered our approach that way so that the teachers would have an opportunity to learn one resource before digging into the next one. It could be a lot to take on at all at the exact same time. So we really kind of staggered that by about 2-3 months here with our summer break to support our teachers in getting into the depth that they need to. We do have opportunities planned for next school year to continue that work though in both reading and writing. So then looking at next school year, we have a few goals that we intend to continue with, one being to continue the implementation of the board-approved resources. We also want to continue to focus on the individual conferring, but then also talk to teachers about how they can implement small group structures within their classrooms. So if you notice in your data or in your conferences that maybe 4 people need the same goal, working with them in a small group a couple times a week to touch base and see what you can do to scaffold that, that's another practice we'll talk about a lot next year. And then in our intervention framework, our MTSS framework, we're also going to talk about that idea of keeping students within the classroom to receive additional support from our intervention staff versus being pulled out of the classroom. So we're calling that our push-in instructional framework. We had some opportunity to get that up and off the ground during our second semester of this school year, and then we intend to implement that more consistently for the next school year. We'll primarily see that at the K-4 level. We're attempting it at the 5-6 level, and we're in the discussion stage above grade 6 at this point, based upon how different building schedules and grade level schedules are impacted by that being a course versus something that you exit your classroom for a little bit and come back in. So just a few more logistics to figure out at those levels.
Can I add something to that, Heidi?
Yes.
So, that's really exciting work, and some of the schools have worked really hard on that, and the really wonderful thing about it is we have all these experts in the building, like literacy experts and intervention experts, and now they're pushing in to work with not only kids who are targeted for intervention, but just more groups of kids that need that expertise. And so, schools will be coming to the school board in the fall for their school improvement plans, and then at the end of the year next year to report out on their data. So I'm hoping that we'll have them build in some things about this push-in and how it's going and how it's addressing student engagement when they do that presentation in the fall. So it's very exciting.
And this is the stage in the process that was started, initiated a while ago. So it's good, it's great to see that we're rolling along and we're gonna finally see the results of that push.
Be very exciting.
Yeah.
I know just anecdotally, we've gotten feedback from a lot of teachers, just oh, I had the opportunity to watch this intervention staff member who has this reading license work with this student, and I didn't know I could do that. That's so helpful now. I can use that with this student too. So just the embedded opportunities it provides for our students and our staff is just going to be so powerful for our system as a whole.
Good to hear. To
big goal next school year will be using our data very intentionally to be able to plan to plan for our students very intentionally. So one way that we'll utilize data will be through the staff that choose to take advantage of the early reading empowerment advocacy training. A big focus of that training, which is let me back up, it's a micro credentials that staff have the opportunity to take. But a big piece of that is how to utilize ongoing running record data and anecdotal data to plan for students. So we're hoping to target kind of grade 1 teachers next year, though others might also have the opportunity to take that pending our enrollment numbers, but that's one way we'll use data very intentionally. Another way that we'll use data intentionally is with our board-approved data tools of Lexia and Amira. So we'll utilize those to kind of goal set for students, gather data ongoing in multiple formats, whether it be through individual skill practice or through additional running record data. So that'll help our teachers plan with more data in mind. Another piece we'll continue to use is that F&P benchmark assessment, which is where there was that comprehension chart. Using that data very specifically with an intended resource called the Literacy Continuum. That resource kind of maps out, if you're a kindergartner and you have your literal comprehension down, here's some goals for your getting to more of that inferential comprehension. And so it has it broken down by grade level and even reading level so that we can target the right developmental level, but still provide students with a scaffolded challenge to help them continue to improve their reading ability over time. And then our Calkins resources that we have adopted have lots of opportunities for built-in data collection through written responses. So we'll utilize those written responses to kind of gauge comprehension through some like rubric checklists, so we can continue to scaffold student goals in that format as well. So we're hoping to kind of, have opportunities for all grade levels to collect data that will help us drive our student achievement forward.
And that's for individual achievement, not just gross collective achievement.
Correct. Yeah.
So the tracking will be possible to track both.
Yes.
Just a note for the ERA advocacy, we have opened it up for sign-up, and we have 27 people that have requested to join the course. We have a limit of 20, so we have to make some decisions, but yes, we have a really great response.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
And the window is still open for them to enroll through July 8th. So we might,
What's the limiting for 20? Why, how did that number?
Because there's two kind of levels to the course. Participants take the course and then they receive individual coaching throughout the course.
Okay.
And so because of the number of trainers we have in the district, they're limited in how much coaching they can do and still do their full-time jobs and
Yes.
all those things. So,
Okay.
yeah, so the people that are literacy coaches that are teaching the course have kind of looked at it by school, how many people they can coach by school,
Okay.
and looked at it that way. So we just made a conscious decision to limit it to 20 so we could also help them out and do their best work.
And that's for this year and that will scale
Yeah.
eventually?
Yeah, so we have those cohorts going through, I think it's through 24, 25 to get the whole elementary in line. And part of it too is with the 27 people we have so far, there's special ed teachers on that list, there's a principal on that list, there's, there's some, it's really cool.
So there's a lot of buy-in, basically.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and so the people, like, if we only take 20, then the others will be able to take it maybe in the future?
Correct,
Maybe offer it.
Yeah. Yeah, we have like a 4-year roll-up plan.
Okay.
Another opportunity our staff will have to continue to grow their skills. Next school year, we'll have our professional learning playbook. It was actually shared with staff before they left for the summer break. The professional learning playbook is loaded with courses that they choose to take, many of which are on our professional learning days that allow them to continue to grow their skills in an area they feel they need to grow them. So in this book, they actually have access to 31 different literacy learning opportunities next school year, which will be a really powerful thing for the teachers to continue to grow their skills, which will then impact our student learning. So that's another opportunity our teachers have that want to make sure we highlight it as well. That is kind of where I wrap up. Do you guys have any questions?
I'm just really excited at what you guys are doing and looking forward to seeing reap the rewards of all this work that you guys have done. Thank you.
On to the next part. Sure. All right, now we're going to move on to the textbook review process.
So, at the start of the, as we're leading into the start of a new, school year, July 1, the students begin September 1, but, always good to review our, textbook review process. We also have the opportunity to talk about it with the current textbooks that are out there for review right now, and that we'll bring forward for approval. So I have just switch over here. Okay. So board policy 361.1 is the selection of resources, and that policy really provides information on how we go about the selection of resources and what kinds of things we need to consider when we're looking at textbooks for review. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go through this presentation today. So let's start with what might prompt a textbook to be reviewed. So one of those things is always alignment with the standards and the learning targets. When we think about when our science standards shifted, first the national standards shifted, and then the state took probably around, if I recall, it was around 5 years to respond to that and develop new standards. And as that shift was occurring, it was really kind of a pedagogical shift in how you look at having assessment boundaries and not going so far at a developmental level that the student would develop misconceptions in science and things like that. Understanding space is one of those that we can goof up and develop misconceptions early on that stay with people for a long time.
Saturn has 3 rings. Not really.
Revolution.
Yeah. The Earth is flat.
One of my favorite videos is Project Universe, which they ask elementary students, the middle school students, and then they are at, I believe it's Harvard, at graduation, and they're asking people to cap down same misconception carried out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it was just eye-opening.
First to market is important.
So you really look at that, when those new standards come out, you really look at the alignment with your current resources as you're looking at adopting as the standards, and then looking at your resources. So when one of the points made when science was new is really looking at that alignment closely, because to do for a whole district K-12 overhaul immediately is a large expense at one time. And is that really how you strategically go about it? So when there are new standards and learning targets, you look strategically at your resources and things like that. You look at your course revision. Does the revision to a course require that new resources would be purchased? Would they be universal? Would it be a new primary resource, or are you just able to supplement some things and continue with the resource? You look at the timing. How old is the textbook? Where are you in the review cycle? So there are certain textbooks that really kind of have a long shelf life. I'm going to use calculus as an example of that. Calculus would have a longer shelf life than some that are more focused on current knowledge and understanding. And think about some of your advanced science classes and when the genome was mapped and how that brought forward some knowledge that we didn't have before. That would cause you to take a look and see, do we supplement or do we need a replacement? And, but again, calculus has a long shelf life on that text.
Well, at this level.
Yes.
Yes, it does change, but at a level that's not relevant to our district.
But yes, conversations with university folks
Yeah.
are super interesting on that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but for us, it has.
2+2 is still 4.
And then that relevance. So additionally, as we learn more and more about the transfer of learning across environments, about establishing that developmental understanding across different contexts of learning. That sometimes would cause us to look deeply at our resources. Sometimes that may prompt us to say, this really is out of date. And again, look at, we need a different pedagogical practice, a different teaching practice based on what we now know. And results. Our results will prompt us. So as we go through our Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles and we're monitoring that data, we look at implementation, we can see trends and we can make expectations about how our data should grow and how our results should shift. And so when we monitor our results, sometimes we decide we need to look at the resource, and maybe that is just a review of implementation fidelity and how has that been adapted, and do we need to retrain and reground in the resource we have, or do we need a different resource? And so our results may guide that as well. So we have that cycle, but that cycle is a time to say pause and look. It doesn't mean an automatic replacement. Now, there are other things too. So we have courses that are university courses. We have courses at the technical college that students take here, and our AP curriculum is revised by the college board as they do the revisions to AP curriculum. So those things will also drive it. So when we decide, we've identified a text for review, we've done the request for proposals, and our social studies 5-8, I'm going to use as an example in here, and I'm going to talk about some other examples. Social studies 5-8 is all 4 years, all grade levels, all students. That's a significant dollar amount. And so we put out a request for proposals following some of our processes in order to have vendors come in and share their resources with us. You'll recall with Novology, we didn't do a request for proposal. We have some smaller things that are a smaller number of students that a request for proposal is not conducive for the companies to come in nor for us. And so there are times when we don't do that. But we always review qualifying text. So qualifying text might be through the RFP process, or it might be through, we know what our course content is, and we know what we're looking for and what we're looking for alignment to in our standards and things like that. So texts that are developmentally appropriate, we have guidelines that identify a text that would qualify for review. We connect with our educators and seek their inputs. They are the users, and they're looking at it as what is teacher friendly and what is accessible and acceptable for my students that's going to get them to the content. we'll go to public review and we'll consider feedback. So I'm gonna come back around this public review a little bit later in the presentation. And so we'll talk about it a little deeper then. Then, and we consider at the district level, we consider all of that feedback, the teacher feedback, the public review feedback, feedback we receive from board members. We also consider the long range outcomes. So what are those immediate and annual costs? Is it going to get us what we are seeking? Does it meet all of our expectations? So then we come to curriculum committee, we seek board approval, and then we input to our training and implementation plan. In this image, the picture on here you can see was posted on June 3rd, and that is because that's the date that our French and AP classes went for public review, went out there for public review. So our public review has shifted in the time that I've been here. And some of that is based on feedback from the public. Some of that is based on really being accessible in a variety of ways. So we've always posted our sessions in the newsletter and and we're always posting them on the website now. I can't say we always posted it on the website. We are now posting it on the website. When I think back to our amplified text, we notified all parents in the age range that it was going to impact and had them available for families to come in and review the resources that were being considered at that time. At that time, there were multiple resources out, like the social studies, we had multiple resources out because these were ones that we knew we could put in front of our kids. And our teachers had the qualifications we were looking for in a resource for content literacy, disciplinary literacy, and teacher support as well. So we have, for public review, sessions are posted in the newsletter on the website. Some great shifts are that our public can now subscribe to our newsletter and also receive it that way. One of the questions our public had is, but if we're not checking the website, just because you're posting on the website, if we're not checking the website, we don't know. And that's accurate, you know.
You can't knock on people's doors.
Correct. And the solution was to allow them to subscribe to the newsletter.
There you go.
And so if they have an interest, if you have that interest, you have to take a look too. But we put it out there in those ways.
What about having public input prior to the RFP process?
So you wouldn't know what resources you would be looking at.
Right, that's the thing, but to be able to help. I mean, I realize that what we seek from publishers is in alignment with the state standards and our curriculum flow.
So, pardon me, I just served a little bit of water. I think.
Here, let's see if I'll do too.
Thank you.
Kind of like a curriculum council kind of thing, like maybe that.
Yeah, if that, I don't know what it would look like, but that sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
So we have had some conversation about.
Just to get ahead of it, you know?
Yeah,
Be less reactionary.
and so I had a public forum for the social studies piece, but it wasn't pre, it was like after the teachers had gone through the resources and we narrowed it down to two.
I know that work's already been
public-
done.
Yeah, so maybe even before that, you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, just to feel like, it just kind of, I mean, as great as it is to have these opportunities, it feels like it's on the lag side. And being able to be part of the process from the very beginning, I think would just ease a lot of the concerns that we see.
I think, so, are you specifically prompted to ask the question, based on the fact that after we went to RFP and we reviewed all of the responses to the RFP, a resource that had not responded to the RFP was brought forward by our public. Is
Yeah,
that really what you're?
yeah.
So, in,
And then there's a frustration that it doesn't get equal consideration, even though it does, you know, we realized that it wasn't fleshed out enough, didn't meet, you know, wasn't hardy enough, for lack of a better word, math person, not a language person. So,
I think that there's always the possibility that we'll never hit every circumstance.
100%.
And
I just want to increase our
Yeah.
odds.
idea of going to RFP, I believe, and I would have to go back and look at agendas, but I believe that's something we discussed here
Yeah.
and before it even went out.
Oh, and
So-
I take responsibility for not anticipating that
And that's okay.
either.
But
So that's why I want to
our
bring it up now, so we
community
can improve
Yeah,
going
One of the
forward.
things to note, and I think having like a council or something like that would help inform this also, is when you send out an RFP, we send it out widely, right?
Yeah.
But even some of the people we target, like, they don't even respond.
Right, oh, yeah,
You know,
they're
so-
not interested.
Yeah, they're like,
Yep.
districts too this, or too that, or too big, or too small, or too whatever, and they're like, we're not interested. So
Yeah.
let's say we send out 16, and then we also put it publicly, so any vendor can join on. We
Yes.
might get 6 back, or 8 back, or, you know what I mean? So there's those pieces, but people don't necessarily understand that if they're not getting that information ahead of time either.
Right, yes.
so we have talked about, how we might do a curriculum council in the future.
Okay, good. I like that
think we
idea.
have that about.
Yeah, okay.
And it may meet like 3 times a year, where it's an update,
Mhm.
and this is where we're headed, and give people opportunities to provide feedback. But we have some things to work on with that, so we were
Sure.
just started kind of shooting that around in the last month.
Okay, good.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, there's
Background
the main work and then the end work.
Yeah.
So I gotta get the main work done.
Yeah. So we also, based on, previously we had put it out at scheduled times so that it was early morning and in the evening, making sure that we had opportunities for public to come, including all shifts. But it was still scheduled, so we might have done, 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. or at one time, and then another time, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. or whatever. And so we had these scheduled specific times, and then by appointment. So people could come and do the public review when it was just open for public, or they could schedule an appointment. And our public who were coming and involved and scheduling those appointments just really made us think they're a different opportunity, and that's how we engaged with the public library. So when we had limited access, we started to put things at the public library. And I'll use the mythology text as an example. We had a few hard copies of that we got in so that we could do the review, and we placed some at the public library as well as here. And that just gave the public extended hours and the availability to go there on the weekend. They still could schedule an appointment if they chose, but not many scheduled, none for that. Once we started having more open access, the public hasn't necessarily needed to schedule appointments to review it. So with the addition of having that 24-hour digital access for review, that has opened it widely. Not every resource is going to have that or going to allow that public access. And I'm saying that because sometimes things are so tight and so small that they can't allow that greater public access. Or the mythology text didn't have a digital version.
I like having both, to whatever degree is available.
Whatever's available.
Yeah.
So I think, and we can maybe use social studies as an example, we had hours at the library where there's a computer set up and login instructions for people to log in and do it there. We had it here, I sat here on a Saturday with Monty for a little while and we went through some things, so we did that, we did the public forum, but then also they just have this wide open 24/7 access. And I think that was really nice because then people could dig in deeply, as deep as they wanted, right? Deeply and then take notes and do all that on their own computer and whatever. But I think that, one thing though about that is we did have that open for a very long time. And at one point the publisher reached out to me and said, I have to shut those links down because you haven't purchased anything yet. And people are still in there looking at stuff and I'm like, I totally get it. So yeah, I mean, it's a really cool opportunity to do both, to have those live events and then have people just dig in as they can find time to do that.
I think that will always be especially important when we're doing a whole universal topic. So
That
again,
was a big
every
one.
child in grades 5 through 8 is going to be exposed to this curriculum. So having all of those broad opportunities because it affects every child in the district. So if we were doing math similarly, it would affect every child, well, let's say a math core course. Affects every child in the district, again, that, and across multiple grade levels, we would want to do it the same way. I'm going to go through a couple of different examples. ProStart. If you recall, we approved the ProStart new text this year. That is an industry standard textbook, and through utilizing the ProStart certification, our students earn an industry certification that they can take with them into the job market right away. That, the text for that was, we used it as long as we could, and we needed to update to the current version. So that one we didn't put out for public. And again, it's industry standard. This is what we're going to choose. Public input for that, we didn't do it, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not-
and like
It's
AP
not
classes
required
are.
it's
course
not
for every
required
student.
course.
Some
Yeah.
people don't like it, they cannot take it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's so different because they're working towards that certification. The assessments for that certification are based in ProStart. And so it's so tailored, it's so finite that if we put it out there for public review, we're still going to come forward no matter what.
Right.
Because of these others. So it is the one that, so that's why I don't want to say 100% because there's an example like this.
Right.
And that is, we didn't.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Thank you. So French right now, our French textbooks are out there for review, as are some of our advanced placement courses. The French at Silverborg, students are required to take a language, but they get to choose. So they're not required to take French. It is the choice. And it is completely an elective in grades 7 through 12. The text for this is multi-grade and multi-year use. And I say that so French A, or level A in French, is taught over 5th and 6th grade. If a student enters new, they may enter as a 7th grader and join in at that level as well. And so French B, French 1B, the second part of that is taught in 7th grade. And French 2 is taught in 8th grade. At the high school level, you could take French 1, which is that AB, in 1 year. You could take French 2. So these texts are multi-grade and used over all 3 schools. How we provide that instruction in French in grade 5 and grade 6 looks very different than how French 1 is taught at the high school. High school every day, 45 minutes. and utilizing that textbook as a consistent resource. French in grade 5 is the teacher is using that textbook as the resource, and the teacher is the primary resource for the kids, serving them that textbook. They might use some of the sheets in there, but they're not necessarily sending that textbook home with kids. They're utilizing that to provide the instruction. And so it's very different. But that is out for public review. At this point, it's been out for 2 weekends, over a full week, and I have no responses. I did have one person come in to review the physical textbooks here, but I have no responses on the form. Same thing with the advanced placement that's currently out there. I don't have any responses for that either. But advanced placement courses, the College Board will review their curriculum and then revise it for appropriate for their courses. When they do that, we need to look at what we're offering our students and making sure that we are setting them up to be able to pass that College Board exam and potentially earn those college credits. So an advanced placement course is a course taught at the high school that is a college level course. Students can choose to take the test at the end, and based on their score and based on the individual college and university, they might earn 3 credits, 2 credits for a specific course, and therefore earning college credit while they're in high school. It does depend on the particular university. If the university takes AP credits, but that potential is there. Students have earned 4 credits for some of the classes, the AP classes as well. So that's a significant savings when they get onto college. There's other advantages. Kids who start their college experience with enough credits to have sophomore status. That's huge. And it affects their scheduling and some of their other opportunities as well. So our courses for AP align with the College Board course expectations. And the College Board has approved texts, not singular, not one approved text, but they'll say these companies have produced the text for AP chemistry that is in alignment with our courses and that meets our expectations. So, yeah.
So I love that we have such a great range of AP courses available. I have friends around the country whose kids have access to BI courses.
Yeah.
IB.
That's it, yeah, and I hear such great things about that. Is that something that we would ever be able to consider, or is it?
Well, and actually.
Sounds like you already know what I'm talking about, and probably know more than I do.
I know before I arrived, the leadership at that time wanted to start investigating going into that. We haven't revisited that, and you can understand all of the context. Locally, on why we haven't, but it doesn't.
Been too busy doing this. Okay.
So
Look at it in the future.
there is a shift if you're gonna do that. It's equivalent to AP, so schools either usually do AP or IB.
I see, it's not,
Or their
it's not a
district is
both.
large enough to have a track.
Okay,
So the district is large enough to have multi-schools, and this might be the IB school,
right.
and this, will do AP and other.
So what would that take?
The component of like IB too, is students end up at the end with a large portfolio of work and things like that.
Yes, it's like,
Yeah,
it's like AP, but in much more modern,
yeah, it is very similar. The credit, for credit basis is a little bit different in those courses. And then, like Laura was saying, you usually want to have like a middle school that follows into a high school kind of thing, because you kind of start kids early and get them going.
Okay.
And some will start at kindergarten.
It's like- AP is something that we were doing in the 80s.
Yes.
Right.
And whereas this IP seems more like what, in an evolution of what AP used to be in is more suitable for students' needs now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good things about it. The district I was in previously was having an IB track. So one of the high schools was an IB one.
So we would need a separate.
Or a school within a school.
School within a school, yeah, when I say separate school,
Yeah.
I know it could be just a
Yeah,
separate school.
I mean, the district
within.
I came from is 20,000 students, so it's a little bit bigger. But, so there was, elementary, middle, and high school IB, all the way through that kids could participate.
So you want, to do that, you would start an exploration to see feasibility in the district. So, and then you set your kids up for the strongest success when you do have that opportunity to start at K. You for sure would want to have them experience some of that in middle school. So you would want to look at a roll up, roll down plan for that. And it might actually start, your first school might be in middle school.
I was gonna say the implementing, you'd have to pick a spot to start with.
Right. And, yeah, so a possibility to explore in the future. I think that down the road, we could maybe in fall, we want to take a look at one of our curriculum committees being a workshop on some of these other opportunities to explore that. Because it's a multi-year planning process that we want to do and then train staff.
I'd like to see that eventually. I'm not the curriculum committee chair anymore, so I can't direct anyone to do that. Hint, hint.
You have input though.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the, within the advanced placement with the course revision, and looking at the College Board approved texts, our teachers in the AP are really connected nationally with that teacher network. So they reach out and they are, what successes have you found? What textbooks are you using? How has that served your students? And they really look deeply at the texts. And so this year we had multiple AP texts that we're considering. Two of our teachers were really had the opportunity to dig in and explore the texts themselves and the responsiveness of students. They have experience with the textbooks that they highly recommend for the courses that they're teaching. And AP Psychology is an AP class that time-wise, our textbook could be looking at purchasing a new one. Time-wise, AP is reviewing that course right now and revising it right now. So logically, we don't, and it's not an immediate, like the teachers aren't like, we have to have a new textbook, this is so told. We're not at a point where we have no access or whatever. So we're delaying that until the College Board is done with the revision so we can see what that embodies. So these French and AP classes are currently out for public review. So you saw in the previous slide the image on our website. And this is an image from the direction sheet on how to participate in the review. So as Jill talked about with social studies, we have this set up on devices. And let me get rid of that outline, excuse me. We have this set up on devices in the ESE that people can come and review. It's on the website, so anybody can click into here and read through the directions, see the timeline, see the courses, access the course descriptions, the standards, and then French are all the vintage text. And so the link is here for all of those texts to preview. And the hard copy again is upstairs in the Education Service Center. And then the feedback link is provided. Same thing with the AP Chemistry and the AP Environmental Science. The information is there to review the courses, so you know what is contained in the course, but then the recommended text, how to access it, and then how to give your feedback. So this is, again, currently out for public review. Wrong one, sorry. And then similarly to what we've used before, we have a Google form for people to provide their feedback. So on here, they would select the course that they want to review, and the form is slightly different. So AP Environmental Science, there's a question that allows people to comment on. It presents the opportunity to explore a variety of viewpoints. And whereas that's not the question in the French textbook, not the same way. And the AP courses state that the text is at a level of rigor for an advanced placement course. And so the questions vary slightly, but you pick the text you want and go to the next, and then, I didn't write Miller, sorry. Wait, why won't you go? Now I can go to the next. So then as you select, and it just has the questions, and then the opportunity to provide an open-ended comment for each one. And then at the very end, there's an opportunity for them to describe the resources, the overall reading, and what additional comments they might have. And then they can provide a summary statement. Each of them are between like 10 and 12 questions. So it's not super lengthy, but it can be when you're replying to the open-ended part. If there's not a limit, so if someone it doesn't limit you to one response only. So if you put in, even for the same textbook, it won't limit you to one response. So once we have the public response, or sometimes we don't have the public response, until the board meeting. So I'd like to bring these textbooks to the board and share the information on them at the June 20th board meeting and do the information then. Take it for approval in July, but I'd like to provide the information on June 20th. And I'll wait until I will put the executive summary in, but then until right before the board meeting, I'll add in any public comments because it closes just the day before the board meeting. So any public comment that is there, I'll include it in that night.
Yeah, there has to be a deadline so that you can prepare for the meeting.
All of the resources, the teachers involved in teaching those courses have reviewed, have tried, have experience with these exact resources or an earlier version of them. And they fully support and recommend for a variety of reasons. The user friendliness for the students, the depth of understanding for the upper levels, the how it's presented to really prepare them in the same manner that someone expected to take a college level is prepared. And then in the French, the developmental aspect of the alignment of the course, the text with the current courses is something that the French teachers really value. Are you comfortable with me sharing this information with the board? So this is our textbook review process, and we'll follow that. And I would then be taking those ones up to the board on the 20th. If you have any questions about that,
Yeah.
I don't expect a lot of public comment on some of these, but I welcome it.
With it being electives and
Yeah,
that nature, you're not gonna probably get as many people that are
right.
in French. I mean, if you don't speak French and.
I know,
Let's
it's hard
get
to
the French
get
textbook. Like, yeah, sure, sounds good.
Yeah. So that's, yeah, you have to have certain skill sets to really understand the content of those. And we don't all have those skill sets. And then to your point, yeah, electives. So that's the process we'll use. It will vary, it won't be 100%. And again, we have some great examples of that. The 5A social studies, the mythology, the co-start. Slightly different processes for each one, very solid reasons for doing those different processes.
So, okay, we'll move on to the using movies in the classroom.
So earlier in May, I had the opportunity to meet on a couple of different occasions with our K-12 staff, and we met virtually so that everybody had the opportunity to attend and didn't have to rush to get anywhere. We did it at different times so that it was convenient for our educators to be close to the end of their school day. And it was a wonderful discussion about the use of film, video, movies in the classroom. And really we centered on this because it seems to be there's often questions about why are they doing movies? Why are they watching a movie in the classroom? And I have to say, I was very impressed with our participants in these discussions and the work that they do, the depth that they talked about the use in the classroom. And I was very impressed with them. And so I'm going to share our process and the why. So the use of video in the classroom really brings forward some unique opportunities. When we talk about allowing students to experience things, let me roll back a little bit. I talk about movies that are produced in the industry, film being slightly different, but also including documentaries, and we think of movies as more of entertainment focused, or telling a life story focused, or drawing parallels. And we think of film more as documentary. And video. Video, we have access to just amazing videos out there from NASA, things on YouTube that people are posting and sharing. And there's just so much access out there to really rich things. And our teachers have so many different ways they can use that. And so much access provided. So, well, let's talk about the experience and then reinforcing and preparing. And then we'll get into some other examples along the way. So when we talk about learning about other cultures and understanding how people around the world access water, how people around the world utilize the natural resources that they're exposed to, or why different industries are located different places, and how people celebrate their own culture, what they define as their culture. We can see through film what we don't have access to in our environment. They talked about the two things with time and era. Time, and era, it can take you anywhere throughout history and allow you to drop in and see things from the perspective of people at the time, but also allow you to access experts around the world when you're looking at a particular era of society. And so when we think about talking about the Ming Dynasty or some other part of ancient world history, being able to access video in order to go and view some of these places, some of these discoveries that we've made of past civilizations is just a really rich opportunity. Immersion, our world language teachers talked about when you get to the upper levels of world language, you have to be able to listen and understand and comprehend and respond to native language speakers. And utilizing film in order to do that and watching a movie in French and having to respond and explain that when they're speaking at the rate and tone of a native speaker is a way to immerse them in that and have them really feel how they can access that language and how they can use their skills. It immerses them in that opportunity. It gives our classrooms the opportunity to observe together, and that is key because it allows the teacher to facilitate some discussion of whatever it is that they're observing together and really help understand where that comprehension is, addressing misconceptions, and guiding students to those learning targets. What's also really key is when you think about our student body and the different experiences and backgrounds that people have, within any given classroom, you will have children who have traveled the world and children who have never left West Bend. And by utilizing film, you are able to expose them all to something, utilize that vocabulary and those visual images to kind of provide some of those background experiences that some may not have had. And that is key. Film can also offer a perspective that that we don't have or we can't tap into because we're not there. And one of the examples that it comes up later is from our teacher of War and Peace. And he uses a clip from the movie Saving Private Ryan when they're entering the beach on D-Day, and he says, and nothing he can do in class gives students the same understanding of what that event was like as that scene. And so it gives them a totally different perspective than they would have if not given that opportunity. It allows us to reinforce and prepare. So our teachers talked about specific skill review and accessing everything from letter D to Khan Academy for certain math procedures and practices and a different way of having it explained to you. And but that idea of that whole variety of things. That letter B review and that Khan Academy example are both things that they've accessed through YouTube. It allows for demonstration of things. So when we're talking about forestry or how applications of engineering, being able to go to a video of that and see how that is done and applied and comes to fruition is just a great opportunity. Some of the really complex things, so, like the interstate in Milwaukee. Think about when that was done, and in order to have those two sides connect, you can't be off, right? And that engineering aspect.
It does happen sometimes.
I know!
But yeah. It's not desirable.
No, and it's not a cheap fix.
No, it's not.
But to see a time lapse of that as well is just kind of really amazing, right? The connection to people around the world, to current and past, and how is what we're studying now related to past discoveries and past cultures and past human experiences. So there's just such a big variety of opportunities. The idea of foreshadowing, some of our teachers talked about when they're reading a complex text, they'll use video clips of what's coming up in the complex text. And again, within the classroom, there may be kids at, quite a wide range of abilities and levels that they're trying to boost up. And utilizing that video before they go and read and then respond sometimes provides greater access to that complex text.
I needed that.
That's
I'm such a visual person that in order for me to understand, I always needed that. Yeah, yes.
Yeah. They talked about understanding elements of focus. So some of those examples are how they're able to show in a 45-minute class period the development of a theme across multiple events and the time within a film or something like that. And whereas if they were going to, and then apply that to their text the next day, if they were going to do that through the text, study of the text, that part would take much longer and not get them into the application as fast. And so they talked about this, using this actually ends up being a time saver and getting kids into doing the work and the learning aspect of it faster. And then I put a PBIS on there because our teachers, they also expressed they have school-wide PBIS incentives where they made them watch a movie as a school-wide. Because we talked, yes. So PBIS is positive behavior intervention strategies. And schools will set a school-wide goal. Sometimes the principal will dress up in a goofy outfit. Sometimes the school-wide goal is watching a movie together and having that as an event. So those are all aspects that we use it. Sometimes the opportunity to grab onto an event. So our astronomy class, having that opportunity to watch a lunar eclipse the day after it happened and talk about that. Again, I would go back to the misconceptions and things that we need in those, but to access that video, those time-lapse videos, all of that immediately is really an important opportunity. Any questions, comments on that?
Is this something you're gonna present to the full board or no?
But when we come back in fall, well, let's get back to
Okay.
background of that, okay? So,
No, people can always watch this recording. They need more information.
they, again, I was so impressed by the depth of consideration and purpose behind how our teachers were utilizing it in the classroom. And with that comes expectations, because all of us probably had an experience as a student when the teacher put the film, okay, oh my gosh, it's totally deep, but we used to rent the film.
Yeah, oh yeah. Is anyone from the AV club here to help with this? I remember.
So, we've all had experience where a teacher would put it on just, and there was no connection, nothing made.
No explanation prior,
You're just watching.
no review afterwards, yeah.
And go, yeah.
Or discussion,
I like running the film strip when I get conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, so, we all have had that experience as a learner, and so that perception always exists. And we'll carry that with us. So really important for us to lay out what our district expectations are around the use of it. And I'm gonna acknowledge that this slide right now, when we talk about movies in the classroom, it doesn't state the PBIS incentive on here. So please keep in mind that that's also still there.
Sure.
But movies are used there, when we're using the movie, the film, the video, it is related to the course curriculum. We don't want to bring forward something that has no connection to our students and what they're doing. That it's age appropriate. Our expectation is that the teacher has previewed all of the content in the movie, film, video before watching it, for so many reasons. One, again, you don't know what's age appropriate until you do that. And for a movie, you need the approval of your administrator. For a film, you want the approval of your administrator. The lunar eclipse example I gave, or the letter B sounds, you don't need that approval. And, but if you're going to watch a full-length movie, if you're going to watch clips from specific movies, you want to make sure you have that approval. And then there's the communication aspect with the parent. And we'll get into that a little bit deeper. But sometimes we have to have permission of the parent to do what we're doing. Again, lunar eclipse example, not necessary. Letter B example, not necessary. But that permission from a parent depends on the age of the student and the rating of the video. The purpose and the content also have to be shared with the person, the parent or guardian, and you're asking them for permission. So our K-8, so at our elementary levels, we should not ever be watching PG-13. But films with ratings of PG and PG-13 would require parent permission and parent or guardian, and an alternative activity provided. So when we think about films that may have that PG rating, the movie Inside Out, which is one, it's a cartoon-based movie, it's about emotions, and it shows a little girl struggling with her emotions. And that is a PG-rated movie. When the movie Sing, that's a PG movie. James and the Giant Peach is a text that has been read for decades, right? This is a parental thing for me. My son's teacher had read it, but when he got the movie, they watched the movie in class, he had to be excused because he was in elementary school and very much a very sensitive child, and he couldn't tolerate how the ants were treating James before it got into the cartoon version, right? Couldn't handle that at all. And knowing your students is really important, understanding that rating. And I didn't know they were watching that ahead of time. So I could have foreshadowed some of that.
When my kids were in 8th grade at their school, they had to watch a baby being born, like a full-on delivery, like full view of everything, which was great birth control for all of them. Is that something that a movie that's not part of our curriculum, is it?
So that is
Or
not
resources?
right. We don't. I'm trying to scan through. It's not part of human growth and development to watch that.
I'd be
We just did all
that.
that.
Might be controversial for some, but
I'm like,
it's a good example of where a movie can really have an impact.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
There might be some, there's not that in the high school health class.
Not the full-on birth. Not watching the full-on
That would be
birth.
the place where I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, high school. Okay.
It's for sure not in human growth and development.
Yeah, and we just
I-
finished doing that too.
That full-on birth. I don't think it's-
Yeah.
Because
that would be an R rated, obviously. The ratings made me think of it.
yes.
Yeah. And squeamish. Yeah.
So we provide an alternate activity. Again, PG-13 shouldn't be used at our elementary levels. The students are so young there. And throughout Badger, you might use a PG-13 film, but again, you're asking for parental permission on that and asserting that the whole film is going to do it and that your administrator has approved that. And again, at the high school, we inform parents But for R-rated movies, we have to have that consent. And R-rated movies are only used based on that educational value and the impact that they have. Again, Saving Private Ryan is an R-rated film, and that scene, they don't watch the whole movie, but that scene is highly impactful. Yeah, correct. So when we go for it, when we share that communication with parents and that ask for that consent, it is active consent, so the parent has to sign off that the child can watch the film. We have to provide a detailed film summary. So not just a little blurb, but these are the scenes that we're watching, these are the scenes that would be eliminated. If there is, so in that little blurb that, like if you looked up a movie and went to read the little blurb that the industry puts out, it might say some sex scenes or something like that. We need to be a little more detailed, like we're eliminating these, but this scene has this or something like that.
Like what, the way film is edited for TV, for broadcast.
Yeah. Excuse me. So, what that, with that detailed summary is that explanation of why it has that rating. So, even our PG movies at the elementary level that they might be watching for PBIS incentive, we should explain this is heavy emotional content, and explain why, what that means. So, because as a parent, if you're not familiar with it and you want to understand why this would be being used, that explanation of the rating is going to be really important. And then you have to share the context and the structure of the movie, the dates and times that it's going to happen, how the teacher is facilitating that viewing, whether it is, we're going to watch a scene at a time, or we're going to watch for this length of time and pause. And then share that the alternative activity will be provided. When our teachers provide that alternative activity, so watching a movie in class often comes with a reflection assessment, some kind of learning activity that you do along with that. The alternative activity can't be based on the film, but should be based on the same concepts, because the student is working to get those same concepts, ideas, understandings down, but it can't be related to the film. So then if it came to the assessment at the end of a unit and you were looking for an understanding or perspective, you can't refer back to the film for that for all kids because you have the alternative. So it's not just a day of alternative activity, how that plays out future forward, you're addressing that. And that was a great discussion with our teachers about how they plan for it. So when you're showing film in school, there are responsibilities that have to be met before and after. So we talked about some of those, summarizing the video, the preparing the alternative activity, they're arranging for a location for that alternative activity to occur. But key to it is preparing the viewing environment. And to use that Private Ryan example again, you have to create a safe space for students to experience that, because it's something you're experiencing. So you have to acknowledge that this may evoke emotions in people, and this is how we'll address it. You want to make sure you have your Kleenex around. You want to make sure that it's a safe space to experience those emotions in front of your peers. And then alternative to that, and then the after, is ensuring the learning outcome for all, and setting the conditions for transition to the next activity. So if I'm watching something like that, and now I need to go to chemistry, or I need to go to some other class right after. How are you as a teacher preparing me to leave this behind? And to, how are you processing this with me? So, I'm focusing on some of our weightier topics, but I think that's really where it's necessary to have the conversation. That setting the conditions to transition to the next activity is really a critical aspect of watching the film, watching the utilizing it. During the video, so we talked about some of our experiences, the teacher is really active. You have to be actively observing how they're interacting with the content, because that guides your next response. And so you really have to be keen in observing that. You also have to be prepped to pause for discussion as appropriate. It may have been pre-planned, but you may have some kind of spontaneous pausing based on how the students are interacting with the content. You also have a responsibility to notice and note. Be class specific. So for the first hour, fifth hour, sixth hour classes might respond differently to the same film. So you're noticing and noting for follow-up with each of them. And it's really important to understand that this is an active activity. I would go with Inside Out as well, so that example, I use that as an example of a PG movie. If you're watching that, you have to be observing your kids in the process. So you know if you need to pause, you might be watching it over several days. You might be watching it as a whole school incentive movie, that you are really monitoring your kids during that. So that you need to pause or have some stuff out. Afterward, again, you're ensuring appropriate dialogue of the content that you observed. Any questions?
That's very thorough. Really, that's very comprehensive look at and how serious the district takes the selection and use of police.
Again, I was so impressed, and in ways I didn't expect to be impressed when we had the conversation. I have to be honest about that.
Yeah.
And my intent would be to have this for guidelines for staff to come in back in fall, so that there's no question about that, and no variance between sites, and that they all know, like, people know we have the controversial issues policy, but how are we handling this with and things like that. So this will be put into guidelines. And so I'm going to go back to your question. When those guidelines are, they're just guidance for staff. So I'm not asking them to be put in a board policy or anything like that. It's just guidance for staff.
Yeah.
I could do that and at a future board meeting and just share it as information. Or I could send it out to the board. What are your thoughts on that? Is this something that all board members need?
I mean, a summary would be sufficient. I mean, you're right, it is, I think you hit it on the head with the misconception people have, because we've all had that experience in our past. It's those experiences that have driven, the need for this, and here this is something to be proud of, but at the same time, I don't know how,
Detailed it would need to be,
yeah,
but just that it's there.
yeah, and you've done a good job of presenting it here, so anyone that can always come back and review this, whether they're the public or a board member.
Is it
So,
something that happens in the report that's given to the board?
Like when you do the superintendent report.
yeah,
Yeah.
we
yeah, I could do that. Just
Yeah.
kind of summarize it, so people are aware that it's there and.
Yep.
Pretty thorough and, yeah,
Announce it is available.
yeah, to watch.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn. Okay. 11:20, okay. Call. Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. And then our next meeting is on the 19th of July at 8:30 in this space. Thank you. I'm going to go get the camera.
Thank you. I can't tell if it's the air conditioner that's taking a lot of time or rain.
Sounds like it's supposed to rain today. I think it's the air conditioning, and I think this fridge was making